Today I'm interviewing Miss Willie Mae Hazard about the great disaster of Texas City, the before, the during, and the after. Miss Hazard, do you remember where you were on April 16, 1947?
Yes, I was living in Texas City and the corner of 21st Street, 5th Avenue South, and there's not even a house there anymore.
And how old were you during that time?
I was 13 years old.
And what grade and what school were you attending?
I was attending Texas City Junior High. I was in the low 8th grade.
Okay, and where in the city, okay, so you said that, who lived in the house with you at the time?
At that time, my mother, my father, 2 sisters, a brother, an aunt, and an uncle.
And what was the city of Texas City like before April 1947? What was it like growing up?
Well, we had no car. We had a horse. Daddy rode the horse to work. We walked from the Heights area to the Showboat Theater in downtown Texas City to go to the show.
That's neat.
We walked to the grocery store, ordered our groceries, put it on the bill, and walked back home, and then they would later bring our groceries home for us.
That's really neat. And were there a lot of businesses here in Texas City, and which ones did you frequently attend?
Let's see, there was a lumber yard. We had all the industry, of course. Grocery stores, gas stations. There was downtown, there was Clark's department store. What was the name of that jewelry store where you bought my wedding rings? There was 2 jewelry stores, Hetherington's, and another one that I can't remember.
And did everyone seem friendly in the city during that time?
Oh yes, everybody knew everybody else, just about. The interesting thing, back to school, we had junior high going in the afternoon and high school was going in the morning because we didn't have enough room at the school, so we had to use the same school.
And so what was the overall mood like in the city during that time? What was before the explosion, what was the overall mood in the city?
Oh, everybody was happy-go-lucky. Everybody just enjoyed each other. We went about our business. I know my grandparents used to say, "Aren't you afraid that that's going to explode?" Well, we never thought about that.
And do you believe the refineries and port in Texas City helped the local economy during that time?
Oh yeah, that was the main attraction to Texas City, was the industry.
Did you have any parents or close relatives that worked out the refineries? And
My dad was working what is now Marathon. It was Stone Oil at the time, and I had a cousin working. First, my dad worked for the tin smelter, then he worked for Stone Oil, which later became Pan American, which later became American Oil, which later became BP.
Wow. And did you have any friends, or did any of your friends have parents or relatives that worked out there, people you went to school with?
All of them did. My closest friend, my mother and dad both worked at American Oil. Another friend, no, she didn't work at the end. Another friend, close friend's father, was a fireman.
So did any of your neighbors work out there as well?
Our neighbor's son worked out there, and several people that we went to church with worked there.
On April 16, 1947, while the first barge was on fire, do you remember where you were?
Yes. I was standing in the front yard with my sister and a close friend waiting for a ride to go to Girl Scouts.
Wow. And do you remember the name of the barge?
Oh, no, I don't.
They talk about it all the time, the Grand Camp.
I remember the Grand Camp.
Right. And do you know why it was on fire at that time?
At that time, I didn't even know it was on fire. I take that back. I did know it was on fire because the next door neighbor's son left his 6-month-old baby with his parents next door to go out there and watch it because the smoke was so pretty, and everybody was running out there to watch the smoke.
And which led me to my next question. What did the adults and people around you tell you about the fire or what was happening?
They just talked about how pretty the fire was, and everybody wanted to go see it, which it's supposed to be a no-no. I don't know why everyone ran to it.
And did you know anyone that was down at the docks helping extinguish the fire at the time?
My girlfriend's father was the fireman. There are several high school boys and girls that played hooky just to go see the fire.
The SS Grand Camp is said to have exploded at 9:12 a.m. Describe that moment for us.
Well, the ground shook. I looked. We were about 5 miles away, and I looked up, and I remember seeing pictures on TV of when Hiroshima was bombed, and that atomic bomb that looked like a mushroom. It went straight up and mushroomed, and I thought, that's an atomic bomb. And it shook the ground. It knocked us to the ground. Knocked my daddy out of bed. He had just come home from working shift work, and the guy that relieved him was killed.
Which led me to my next question. Were you or anyone around you hurt?
All the windows were blown out of the house, but no one, God bless us, no one was hurt.
And you're answering my next question because I was going to ask you, describe the damage to the place you were at during the time of the explosion.
Blew the windows out. And that's about the extent of the damage to the house. Thank goodness.
And from what you remember at 13, did it seem like there was mass chaos in the city at that time?
Oh my gosh. My uncle had just gotten out of the service, and he went ballistic. We had to catch him. He was running around. We went to the school. My brother was in first grade, and we had to go by the school to pick him up, and everyone there was just running around like they didn't know what to do.
And so, well, that answers a lot of my next question. You're doing well at that. What was the mood like in the city after the explosion? Was it?
No one knew what to do. Evidently, we had a car at that time, by that time. Oh, my uncle's car. And we got in the car and left the city with my girlfriend because her mother and dad were at work at American Oil.
Wow.
American Oil at that time. And we couldn't take her home, and we wouldn't want to it. And so we had to take her with us.
And and you answered my next point. Did you and your parents stay in the city the night of April 16th, 1947?
No, everyone, I think, just about evacuated the city. We went to Alvin, to my grandparents' house.
Do you remember the mood in the city after the explosion, and what was it like? So when you came back into town, what was the mood like?
They wouldn't let us come back for, I think, about 2 weeks we were out, and then we had to. The Red Cross was here. It was subdued. We lined up for shots. We had to take inoculations. We had to boil our water for a while. It was pretty sad. Pretty sad.
And we'll go back to when you were in Alvin. What were your thoughts what were your thoughts that ran through your head the night of the explosion?
All I could think about was my friend who didn't know where her parents were. She didn't know whether they were dead or alive. Her parents didn't know where she was. All I could think about was how she must have felt and how her parents must have felt.
Did you remember the other ship that exploded that night? Do you remember hearing about
High
that?
Flyer or something.
Right.
About 1 o'clock in the morning, there was another explosion. And my cousin got lost from the rest of the family. They didn't know where he was, and he spent the night on a submarine somewhere. And they finally got together later.
Wow.
It was hairy.
So let's talk about the good part. The days and months after the explosion, what was the rebuilding process like that you remember?
Well, that was in April, and there was no more school. They sent us, after we got back here, they sent all of the school kids on a bus out to a place in Webster for a week to get us out of town and get us out our minds off of what was going on. So we stayed for a week at that camp, and they did things with us, crafts and whatever.
And so you had said, so that's people that helped also, because my next question is, were there a lot of people that came in to help? So you said the Red Cross. Do you remember, they talk about in history, some Frank Sinatra and some of the others?
I didn't even know they were here. But I will tell you that, interestingly enough, my husband now lived in League City at the time, and they lived in a garage apartment. And they kept a fireman that came in and to volunteer, and he stayed with them in League City and came here and helped with
So what was the overall mood during the years of rebuilding?
everybody worked together. There was a camaraderie, people coming together. But my daddy said, this is enough of this. So in July of that year, he moved us out of Texas City. So from April to July was all I was here during the explosion. I mean, after the explosion.
Oh.
But the Red Cross was in. There were a lot of volunteers coming in, and I remember reading later about all the celebrities that came in.
So did the city start looking normal after that?
Do what?
Did the city start to look normal again after that?
Yes, we ended up coming together and rebuilding, and it was a city of, let's get this city back going again.
Well, leads me to my last point. You know, they say the books that you read and what the city models after, they say, I'm asking you, do you believe over the past 6 to 8 years that the city has rose from the ashes like a phoenix? Like
I was just getting ready to mention the thing.
Yeah.
That's our symbol now.
Right.
And I certainly, because after the explosion, after Carla, we moved here, back here from League City after I married and had children. We moved back to Texas City 1 year before Carla hit. So Carla devastated the city. We rose back after that, came together, rebuilt.
That's good.
Then Ike saved us. But yes, Texas City is a rebuilder.
So what's the biggest change that you see since then? Since the explosion of 1947, what's the biggest change that you see?
Biggest change in the city?
Yeah, what's the biggest change that you see? Right.
Well, there's been a lot more safety precautions.
Good.
They've learned that fertilizer will explode. That back then they didn't know that.
And you kind of answered this on my last one. You did credit it. Have the people united more since then? You believe?
Yes.
The
yes.
city, and
The
stuff.
city works together. We've even had, how was I going to put that? There's just more of a working together, a camaraderie and pulling together. I know, for instance, after Carla, when our church people had no money at that time because all of them were putting it into their houses, we had the biggest Lottie Moon offering that we'd ever had in the church.
That's awesome.
In the history of the church. So people were willing to help everyone else.
And then my last question, you answered again earlier, but in your opinion, do you think that the city has been a safer place to live in since?
Oh, definitely.
1916?
Definitely a much safer place. Even though my daddy was sorry we moved back here. He said, I tried to get you out of that place and you moved right back. But yes, Texas City is a much safer place.
Well, in closing, that's all the questions I have, but you answered everything, and most importantly, everyone likes to focus on the history of it, but I like to see what it was like before, and my favorite part is after, because now we live here and we're raising a family here, so thank you for answering those questions for me, man.
Well, you have a good city to raise your family in.
Thank you.